A tax bill introduced by Republicans in the Senate could put a major tax cut for millions of Americans in jeopardy. Their counterproposal breaks significantly with one of those crafted by the House GOP members, and one of the key members of the House Ways and Means Committee is Ohio Congressman Jim Renacci. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. We appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Liz. Glad to be here.
I want to start with a rather broad question before we get into some of the nuances, which have already been picked apart between now and Thursday, obviously, is really the margin of error that we're looking at. In the Senate, it's 2, and in the House, it's 24. And if there is anything that happens between now and December, obviously all eyes are on Alabama. That margin of error in the Senate could be even slighter. It could just be one vote off. I mean, what are lawmakers up against right now?
Well, look, number one, we've got to do this for the American people. We've got to make sure we're cutting taxes for them. And at the same time, we've got to get a sustained growth. We've got to lower the corporate tax rate. So that's what Americans are looking for. They don't want us to be worrying about the 21 or the 1 or 2. They want us to come together and get some things done. And I think that's what's important. That's what we're going to have to do in the next couple months.
Okay, so with that, I want to put a graphic up for some of our viewers at home. It sort of breaks down the differences that we're seeing in the House and the Senate proposals. That being said, a lot of it has deductions being cut in different areas that are different for folks. And I'm curious as to, when you look at a graph like this and you see the differences, where is there going to be compromise in the conference? Because I don't want to go through the fact that there's 7 or 4 brackets, or the deduction for mortgages are between 1 and 500. I'm curious as to where Americans are going to see a compromise. What is the final number going to look like on some of these columns?
Well, Liz, here's what I'm hoping we're looking at. And again, I'm a businessman for almost 3 decades. I am also a CPA, so I understand the tax code. When it comes to the standard deduction, 70% of Americans do not itemize today. When you double the standard deduction, 95% of Americans don't itemize. So I was bringing this up in the committee that these deductions sometimes never even make it to the tax return. So I'm hoping that we're looking at that. I know we both, the Senate and the House, agree to double the standard deduction. That's what's got to be important. So I hope we're not bickering on the actual deductions, because in many cases we're only talking about 5% on average of Americans that'll have those deductions.
Okay, so then if that, and I know you're not saying that deductions aren't important, but are you saying then the brackets are more important? Are you saying that the corporate tax rate is more important? You know, what's going to give?
Well, I think the most important thing is lowering taxes for middle Americans, but I also think lowering the corporate tax rate. We have to be able to do that to be competitive. Today, we're not competitive. We have the highest corporate tax rate, statutory tax rate in the world, and we have one of the highest effective tax rates in the world. That's why businesses are leaving and going overseas. So I'm a proponent. I know many members.
When you talked about tax relief for the middle class, that's where I think there's people who are worried, because we even heard from Senator Mitch McConnell, who said it may not be the relief that we're seeing. In fact, some people may even see a tax increase.
Well, when you go across the spectrum, I think in the long run, the majority of middle Americans are going to see a tax cut and an opportunity to have more money in their paychecks. There's always going to be 1 or 2 issues or individuals that may be outside the scope of the average. But in an average, I think all deductions, in all of the areas, the 15%, the 10%, all those areas are going to have tax cuts. And I think that's what's important, making sure that overall middle Americans get that tax break.
Is it going to be catastrophic if we don't see some type of tax reform, especially for Republicans going into 2018?
I do think Americans are looking for tax reform and a tax break. I do think we need this for corporations to be able to grow here in America. So I think in the end, Republicans, but also Democrats, have to be looking at this. This could be catastrophic for both parties if we can't work together to get something done. That's been my frustration for 6.5 years in Washington. Too much partisanship. We need to be able to work together for the American people, and we need this. We need to be able to give them more money so they can actually save some money for college, for things they need. And at the same time, we have to reduce this corporate tax rate, because we have to be able to compete in a global marketplace.
Right. You may have some Democratic congressmen who say that their voices aren't being heard for obvious reasons, sir. But that being said, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll be keeping an eye on what happens this week, and obviously if anything happens before Thanksgiving. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.